Hi, this is Josh Kulp. We are learning Daf Shevui. We are on Daf Mem Gimmel of Masechet Kiddushin. And there's two topics I want to address, both of them relatively briefly today. The first one is the practicality of Talmudic Halacha. I think we have today an excellent example from the first half of this Daf of something that makes a certain amount of sense, but we wouldn't want to see it practically implemented. And that's the issue of whether somebody who sends somebody else out to murder is obligated under in a human court. There is this breita where someone who says to his agent, go out and kill somebody, right? He's obligated, and the murderer, in other words, the agent is obligated, and the one who sends him is exempt. Shammai Hazaken, Shammai the elder, says, in the name of Chagai and Avi, the one who sends him is chayav, and he brings a case of David and Uriah as proof. Now, basically, the Tanna Kama is representative of normative law, the law that we see in this sugi, the law we see elsewhere, that when you hire an agent to do something wrong, we've seen this several times, the agent is liable and not the one who hires the person. And I think you could imagine, we wouldn't want that to be the law in the real world. We wouldn't want somebody to be able to hire somebody else and not be convicted for that crime. I'm not an expert in American law, but I believe that you can be convicted for murder for hiring somebody else to do the murder for you. I mean, the agent would also be obligated, but the one who hires the person would also be obligated, which makes sense. He's the one who set in motion, who caused this thing to happen. On the other hand, I think we can see some level of justice in the idea that the sender is exempt because he didn't force the agent to commit the murder. He just offered him a financial remuneration for doing so. And so why should we consider him a murderer? The agent should have listened to God. Divrei Arav, Divrei Hatamid, Divrei Mi Shomi. When you have the words of the master, in this case God, and the words of the student, who do you listen to? You should listen to the master. And the master said, Lo tirtzach, do not murder. So I think we can, in our way of thinking about the law, on the one hand, live with the ideal that's in the Talmud, and that people are responsible for their own actions, and yet when it comes to human courts that we recognize, not rule according to Talmudic law, which is, in the truth, I don't believe that many of these laws were ever implemented in reality. The second thing I wanted to talk about is not really related, but I think it's interesting, this notion that Uriah deserved death, this justification of David. First of all, the rabbis sort of go back and forth. Should they condemn David? After all, the prophet Nathan condemns David for his adultery, for his stealing Uriah's wife, and for his sending Uriah out to be murdered. Certainly, heinous acts that the Tanakh itself tells us of quite without much of a defense at all of David. So the rabbis, on the one hand, want to defend David. After all, David is the great religious leader of Israel. David is the composer of the books of Psalms. David is the elect of God, the anointed of God, the progenitor of the Mashiach, of the eventual redeemer of the Jews, or redeemer of humanity. On the other hand, the Bible condemns him, and his acts are certainly condemnable. We see here an attempt to defend him by saying that Uriah was a rebel, which doesn't really match the pshat of the Tanakh. There is a machlok, an interesting machlok, a dispute over what his act of rebellion was. One is that he called Yoav, the general, Adoni Yoav, my master Yoav. That's Rashi's interpretation. He shouldn't be calling Yoav his master in front of David, who is his true master. And a second interpretation found in the Tosfot is attributed to Rabbeinu Tam's father, Rabbi Meir, is that he refuses to listen to David's instructions to go home, enter his house, sleep with his wife, and his refusal is an act of rebellion, and the Tosfot struggle with that too, right? Of course, he should reject that offer, right? After all, like he says, how can I go sleep at home in the comfort of my own home with my wife when my soldiers are out in the field and they're alone, which makes him a great soldier, a great leader of soldiers into combat. And that's also then we revert to something he said something wrong. So we can see here that even the Rishonim struggle to find why Uriah should be, even in the smidgen, deserving of death. My imagination is that, like, in reality, everybody who reads the story of David knows that he's condemnable. On the other hand, there is a natural tendency to want to defend our leaders, especially our ancient leaders, and we can see that playing out both in the Talmud and in the commentaries on the Talmud, trying to struggle to find some sort of defense for David.